Coming up next, this week in computer hardware, can AMD's Mantle make Battlefield 4 faster? Monitor upgrade 4K versus WQHD. Is overclocking dead? ThinkPad review, Asus Chromebox, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 253, recorded February 6th, 2014. Mantle benchmarks and the 4K desktop debate.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ting.com. Ting is a mobile phone service that makes sense. Save money with Ting. Pay only for what you use. Ting doesn't require a contract and offers unlimited devices on one shared plan. To save $25 on your first Ting device, visit twitch.ting.com. That's twitch.ting.com.
Welcome to This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm your host, Patrick Norton, and this is Twitch show that aims to bring you the best, most informative, most useful, most amazing, and most helpful news stories and questions or answers for questions about computer hardware. And we even touch a little bit on the mobile side of things. We love the tablets, and we even show a little bit of love, just a little bit, to the smartphones. Joining me as always, Mr. Ryan Schrautz, who is freezing.
We do sometimes bring the questions, being completely open about it. We do sometimes actually bring the questions to the audience.
This is true.
Yeah.
Dear audience, do you plan on upgrading your GPU this week?
It's a cyclical relationship in my book, right? They know things that we don't know because there are many more of them than of us.
Mass knowledge.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I had the best feeling today.
Okay.
I had loaned someone my GTX 760 because their GTX 770 was in what I will affectionately call Staples hell. Staples said they had 3-day delivery and it showed up like 12 days later. It was a great price, though. I will give it that. But, you know, I've been running the GTX 760 and then I had to run a 5770 for several days, which is a considerably slower GPU.
Now, may I ask why you didn't lend them the 5770?
IR stupid, IR generous. Let's go back to IR stupid, I think.
Okay,
is probably
fair
the
enough.
best way to do it. I've also been laughing. It's like, I also have temporarily swapped in onto that machine an a first generation 80 gigabyte XM25 Intel SSD. And while it's a lovely drive, or it was a lovely drive,
80 gig.
Yeah, you know, it's a little cramped. It's amazing how much space Windows takes up. Once you get through like Windows 7 and all 7,000. It's because
a little bit later in the show, we'll have the SSD deal for you to quickly mention.
Oh my goodness, that would be a good idea. Also, kids, if you're installing Windows 7, Slipstream and Night. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, slipstreaming your service packs is a big time saver. I wish it were a little bit easier to do, to build that installer, but you know, I feel like at this point, I really feel like Microsoft should just be giving away the ISOs for all of this stuff because they have so thoroughly implemented DRM into Windows 8 that you should just be able to download it. You shouldn't have to have an MSDN or TechNet account or something like that to download the ISO, you know, but
don't get me started.
Yeah.
Technically, ladies and gentlemen, this is a show not just about installing operating systems and loaning out hardware to your friends, but it is a story, ladies and gentlemen. It is a show about computer hardware. And one of the most exciting things we've been looking at, staring at, longing for is seeing the real-world performance of Mantle, AMD's technology that's going to give direct access from games to the GPU, hopefully giving them the mad acceleration. Early performance testing Battlefield 4 with Mantle on AMD. Mr. Schrautz, are you thrilled or did it turn out to be disappointing?
I would say I'm in between those two answers. I think I am cautiously optimistic about what I saw, right? So if you look through those couple of pages of results, like the first set of results doesn't look good, where Mantle performs at about the same level as DirectX 11. And then the second set of results looks much better. So the kind of interesting thing that happened here is, you remember back to last week where EA released the Mantle ready update, but there was no driver. Long story short, testing time was very constricted, and we had a pre-configured Battlefield 4 test method that we have been using in our office for a while, right? So when we do graphics card reviews or the APU reviews, like the Kaveri dual graphics testing we did, use Battlefield 4, and we had a specific test run that you use, something that you do over and over and over again. You get good at, you make sure that it's repeatable as can be for real world testing. And that's what we tried to use initially to benchmark Mantle. And as the way our kind of frame rating system works is we're capturing a ton of data, and then we kind of capture a whole bunch of data and then go analyze it, right? We put it into our scripts and we see how they all compare and stack next to each other. So the unfortunate part for me is, you know, I would test Mantle and I would test DirectX 11 and kind of back and forth. And you wouldn't necessarily know right away what the result was until hours go by, you've done a whole bunch of testing and you go analyze it. So the problem was, according to AMD, the section of the game that we were using for benchmarking, which was a single player level called SP DAM, DAM. I forget what the actual name of the map is, but it apparently is a very CPU light portion of it. It's kind of, there's a large portion of it is kind of like pre-scripted as the camera kind of goes through certain areas on its own. Perfect for GPU testing, but not perfect for trying to test CPU bound instances of a game, as it turns out. So at the end of the day, we had done a ton of testing, and the results that we got were like basically the worst case scenario for Mantle. And that sucks, right? Like that's, it makes AMD look bad even when they may not deserve it, right? So kind of as the rushed thing that we were able to do was, okay, I said, I don't have time to go through all these maps and find which ones are CPU limited and GPU limited. Let's go, what do I know is CPU limited? And that's multiplayer maps, especially like 64-player loaded servers, multiplayer maps. So I was like, all right, let's go benchmark some of those. And in those, if you look at the second page of graphs, a little bit further down, where you see the best case scenario, it's actually a little bit further down than that, the next collection of them, you'll see that the frame rates are actually much better for Mantle than DirectX 11. Yeah, this is the set that we're looking at here. So that's your frame times, and if you go down to the next graph below that, you'll see the frame rates, the average frame rate. So we're actually getting a boost of from 51 to 71 frames per second, going from DX11 to Mantle. That's 27%. It's a significant performance increase. It's actually pretty impressive. And at 2560 by 1600, I think our difference was actually a little bit higher, like 32%. Now, these are impressive things to look at. The only caveat to it is that with anytime you're testing multiplayer maps with any game, not really just Battlefield 4, but especially like something like Battlefield 4 that is very dynamic. Anytime you log into a server, even if it has the same number of people, it's the same server, depending on their connections, depending on what has happened in the world state before you joined, performance is going to be variable. So because we're obviously doing multiple runs, they're not identical. But we ran it for a much longer period of time in order to kind of normalize some of that noise and variability. So it does appear that Mantle will improve performance on CPU bound instances of games, even moderately CPU bound. And the real trick is going to be what sections of those games are doing that and what hardware configuration you're using. In particular, in our testing, we were again trying to give AMD the benefit of the doubt. We're using an R9 290X, their highest end flagship single GPU graphics card. And then we were pairing it with a Kaveri A10 7850K APU, which is their flagship APU, but in terms of high performance processors, it's pretty far down the line, right? If we're looking at just the x86 CPU core portion of it. So we were, weighting this in favor of AMD, and I think that's why we saw the 27 to 30% performance gains in multiplayer. If you're running a Core i7 4770K Haswell with the 290X, your performance gains are going to be much less, I believe. And that's something we're still doing more testing on and trying to come up with some kind of concrete answer to that. The problem with that statement is that their drivers are so early for
Right.
Mantle, that this could all change. And it would, like, scaling with the HD 7000 series and the set 270X and 280X is kind of close to zero. Like, they have not spent time optimizing that. They've really optimized for 290 and 290X and 260X as well. And so it's hard to, I don't think that the software is at a point where even if we spent a full week benchmarking, that we could come up with some kind of concrete answer that I say, this is how Mantle is going to look on Battlefield 4 for the foreseeable future, because DICE is going to make changes, AMD is going to make changes, and it will be a constantly influx thing for the next 6 months, probably, right?
I was gonna
Crossfire
say-
support is very sketchy, things like that.
I was about to ask, like, how long do you think it's going to be before, Mantle goes, from beta to gold? And 6 months.
Well, that's just kind of a guess. The real problem is this is a huge undertaking from AMD. Developing a new API today is much more complicated than, say, when 3DFX built Glide, right? The world is drastically different, and people expect drastically different things from it.
Right.
And AMD is not a company that has the financial resources that somebody like Intel does. So they have to be careful about where they invest their development time. So I'm a little bit worried that with the first release of Mantle, with this one game that they were supporting, they were trying to get this was the one game that Mantle needed to support, and they still had problems. They don't have all the graphics cards ready. They don't have multi-GPU ready. They have some stability issues. They have some performance issues. And, I think I saw on a slide recently that there's 3 engines in like 22 games or something like that in development, they claim, for Mantle. And if that's the case, good for them potentially, but it also means that they're going to have to really step up their game in support and development of Mantle, right? It's one thing to try to get Mantle to work with one game with 3 graphics cards, but when you're trying to get Mantle to work with 20 games with 20 graphics cards, how much more stress is that going to put on this company? And are they going to be able to do it quickly enough and reliably enough to really make an impact long term? And I just don't know. I don't know yet.
So you actually got to interview AMD's Gwennady Rigueur. How did that go? I mean, what was the kind of the tempo of that interview?
So this was actually Scott did the interview for us. It was through email, and it was just kind of a follow-up of some of the talks that AMD had given about Mantle, some of what we learned from AMD in briefings. And actually, Scott just sent me a message because he wanted me to make sure I point this out. The kind of big point that was kind of subtly introduced through the interview was that Mantle as an API uses the same shader compiler as DirectX, which means that pure shader bound performance should be the exact same on Mantle that it is on DirectX. So that means instances in a game that are GPU bound, and not just GPU bound, but shader bound, are going to see 0 performance changes up or down going from Mantle or going from DirectX to Mantle. There's some other little tidbits in here about the HL Mantle shading language being compatible with HL, SL, driver optimizations, whether or not you could use Mantle for other things like compute, memory transfers, video encoding, decoding, that kind of thing. And they go into some of those answers. A lot of it is still pretty vague. What about the options of keeping, if you have a 7000 series card today, but you upgrade to a 9000 series, could you keep both of those in there? Because now they're just treated as compute devices. Will a Mantle-based game engine be able to reliably interact with a high-end GPU in a lower cost, lower performance GPU and still get adequate scaling out of it, right? So there's a whole lot of interesting things. They don't go into a huge amount of detail on that, but like for example, that answer was that Mantle definitely offers more options for handling multi-GPU beyond how they could in Crossfire configurations. but it's up to game developers to decide how to leverage those configs. And in the future, we hope to see use of asymmetric configurations, right? It's where you don't have to have identical GPUs or maybe even identical generations of GPUs to get that to work, which would be pretty cool. There's several other questions that he goes into here: HSA features, compute-based game engines, using Mantle, that kind of thing. It's definitely worth a read if you have any interest in kind of the programming side, the development side of these types of games.
Pretty cool.
Yep.
Lenovo ThinkPad 440s Ultrabook review. Ladies and gentlemen, is this the ultimate business ultra portable? Are you finally going to upgrade your laptop?
You know, I don't know. The problem with Lenovo, the problem I have with Lenovo, I love their machines. I'm using one. I've used one for a long time. Is that they put out so many different ones that it's almost impossible. Even as somebody who I see a lot of them here, and the guys that write for us review a lot of them.
Right.
I can never really like force myself to move away from the one that I'm already comfortable with, right? So this the T440s is a 14-inch design. I have a 12-inch design. I would like to move to a 14-inch design. It's fairly light. It's got it's fairly thin. It's labeled as an ultrabook. That I have to double check and make sure that's not just an ultra portable. But you know, the S series for ThinkPads is always kind of like the thin, light version of it. It's a little bit on the pricey side. I think it's as spec'd as Steve benchmarked it was about $1,500, which is a steep price point for a 14-inch Windows laptop, regardless of who it's from or what it does or anything like that. But it's, you know, it's got Haswell. It's got fairly low end graphics. It doesn't even have HD 4600. It's got HD 4400. But you know, a good 1080 piece like matte IPS panel, that's pretty nice. Battery life is really, really, really good on the machine. If you go look through the review, you can see the battery performance benchmarks on there. CPU performance is exactly in line with every other Ultrabook that's out on the market because they all use the same processor. So there's no surprise there. And then for gaming, it's really not a gaming machine. You know, if you want to run StarCraft 2 on low settings, you can do that kind of thing. But otherwise, you know, leave that for your desktop or buy a different laptop for sure.
I don't know. I was impressed by the battery life. At least the 3-cell external battery.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that it gives you those two options. The one that is flush and flat, and then the other one that is actually, instead of extending behind the laptop, like I won't want to lift this up, but like my ThinkPad X230 does, it extends down. So it actually kind of raises the keyboard level up a little bit too. I don't know which one of those is better. Probably just depends on, you know, do you carry yours in a backpack or a briefcase, or I don't know, but it's neat to see. Plus, hey, interchangeable batteries,
which is a good thing. But like, and then you throw in the 6-cell external, and they're looking at the, you know, 22 hours battery life. I like that. Especially when you look at, you know, all of a sudden 7 hours of battery life, which would have been huge 2 years ago, suddenly seeing kind of mediocre. Cool figure. I loves me some increased battery life. Asus Chromebox available in March, ladies and gentlemen. I'm kind of curious how this does in some areas of computing. The Chrome laptops from Google seem to be pretty popular. This one is pretty interesting with the idea of that there's going to be a dedicated Chrome desktop, fairly inexpensive, you know, $179 compared to Samsung's $330 offering. Intel Celeron 2955U processor, which is not really going to blow you away. You can step up to an eye-searing Intel Core i3 model if you do need all the performance. And it's interesting, HDMI and DisplayPort connections for dual monitors in 4K. And I quote Scott up on PCPer.com, quote, given that this is a 5-inch by 5-inch and fanless design with access to Netflix and other streaming services, it could make a good replacement for a smart TV. I actually would like to get hands-on this. $179 March, 100 gigabytes of Google Drive space, free for 2 years, and a VESA mount kit if you want to bolt it onto your HD TV. So I think this could be a lot of fun. It's cheap. Did you see
the other announcement that went in hand with this? Where Google announced, I forget what the service is called, but it's like a teleconferencing service that uses these Chrome boxes. So for $1,000, they give you a Chrome box, a camera, a microphone, and a speaker. And apparently, the software that uses it kind of works over like the Hangout API, like the same kind of video setup. So they're offering that for like $1,000 per station,
Right.
and they say it's like you can get 10 of these set up for the price of one, business office teleconferencing configuration as it exists today. It's pretty interesting. I mean,
If it works.
yeah, that's kind of my issue. Is it's like it's a $179 Steam box, plus the camera just looks like a Logitech 1080p camera as far as I can tell, and then
Time out. $179 Chrome box, not Steam box.
Yeah. Oh, did I say Steam box? Yeah, Chrome box.
Yes.
Sorry.
Are you
Yeah,
testing
yeah.
Steam boxes by any chance?
No, I'm not actually. I'm just tired and delirious and confused. Look, I mean, there's a lot of machines that are suddenly cropping up. I can't be responsible for. I'm supposed to be.
If it was the L2747H from EVGA, you would have it memorized, dude. That's all I'm saying.
You know what? That's not the case. I can tell that because the Intel NUC, like we're testing Intel NUC devices, and the model numbers on those are like I've had it explained to me 3 times by Intel personnel, and I go, sure, yep, nope, it's gone. Nope, everything you just said is completely out of my mind. So
I feel the same way about BMW. A friend of mine once sat down and explained to me the incredibly Teutonic rigor and glory and organization that is the BMW numeric naming system. And right over my head.
Yeah. So for $9.99, you get the Chrome box with a remote, a camera, a microphone for conference rooms. It uses the Hangouts as the back end that is also compatible with existing conference setups from Video and Uber Conference for phone calls.
Interesting.
It's interesting. And and Google is supporting it. Like you'll get a person to talk to with it, which for Google services is pretty hard to come by. Yeah. Pretty hard to come by. Yeah. I'd be willing to try it. I don't think like we were talking about it as like, hey, could we maybe use that as like a replacement for how we do podcasts or something like that, but not at $1,000 a head, I think. Yeah.
But if you look at the price, what people charge, gigantic Fortune 500
Yes.
companies for teleconferencing systems, that suddenly looks like the bargain of the century.
Yeah, I am just not one of those companies.
Most of us aren't one of those companies.
Yeah.
Jeremy writing at PC Per, AMD adds open source to their hardware-based video encoder. What exactly does this mean, sir?
Mostly what this means is that they are open sourcing a portion of their hardware-based video decoder so that programs that run on Linux, programs that run on open source operating systems that require open source, to continue to exist and to take advantage of it, will now be able to use kind of an AMD GPU or an AMD APU to accelerate that video encode and decode process. So, for example, what I think this is probably going to be used for is with SteamOS. If you're going to, if you want to do a Twitch style game streaming type thing on Linux, it would help a lot if you had the ability to take advantage of a GPU's encoder or decoder in hardware, as opposed to having to depend on the CPU side of things for that. And by enabling this as an open source option, AMD is saying, they're kind of trying to take what many may consider like the anti-NVIDIA stance, which NVIDIA is still very closed source with their drivers and everything. And AMD is saying, hey, let's open it up. Let's let everybody use it. People will write software on it. People take advantage of it. And, potential gains down the road. In theory, again.
In theory.
Yeah.
It's a good theory. It's a lovely theory. We should take a moment to thank our sponsor, ladies and gentlemen. You may have heard of them. It's Ting. Ting is an MNVO. That means they resell other people's cell phone service. In this case, Sprints. I myself am a Ting customer. Pretty big update for us. I know you've probably heard about Ting before, but it's pretty cool. They've lowered their pricing, especially for high data users. And if somebody uses a wireless hotspot powered by Ting, this is exciting news. You choose a plan, but the reality is you pay just for what you use. Ting has received better pricing from Sprint. They want to share their savings directly with their customers like me and hopefully you. Nothing fancy here, just better rates and lower monthly bills. If you've already tried Ting's savings calculator to see how much you can save with Ting, you should probably take a look at it again if you're a heavy data user, because you could be saving a lot more. It's really cool. Here's the deal. Ting wants you to buy your hardware. All right, you can bring a Sprint-compatible phone onto Ting. You can buy a device from Ting. Ting will even try to help you find a used device. And, and then it gets really simple. It's a no BS mobile service. They'll give you unlimited devices on one plan. Each device costs a flat $6 per month, and you pay for the amount of data you use. You don't use any data, you don't pay anything. You use a lot of data, you pay a little bit more. And when I say data, I could also be saying minutes of phone use or, text messaging. And it's really cool. No overcharges, no crazy penalties when you go over X gigabytes per month of downloads or too many texts. And they pretty much give you everything for a low price. Voicemail, caller ID, tethering, no extra charge for tethering, no extra charge to use your phone as a hotspot, three-way calling, call forwarding. There's no extra fees. They're not going to nickel and dime you to try to get you to pay for every single thing you might do for a phone. As a matter of fact, if you're paying a early termination fee to come to Ting, they'll offer you a 25% credit on your ETF up to $75 per device. And you can go to ting.com/ETF for that. I like Ting. They've been easy to work with. I had one technical question. Actually, I may have had two technical questions, but it was really nice. I got to talk to a human. They were on top of it. Well, you laugh, right? But you've always had that moment where you're like, would you like to talk to our mobile online customer typeset database chat unit? It's like, no, man, I don't want to type. I want somebody to fix my problem. But it was nice. It was a good conversation. They told me what I needed. They got me going. And then they sent me a lovely email that summarized everything we talked about. I was like, wow, this is so nice. And it's cheap, people. It's inexpensive. You can save a ton of money, especially if you're a family running a whole bunch of devices. We would like you to check out Ting. Twitch.ting.com is the place to go. Help the show by going to twitch.ting.com. Save money, better manage your mobile phone usage with Ting. Check out their savings calculator and see how much you or your company can save. And This Week in Computer Hardware viewers also save $25 on your first Ting device when you sign up. Please check out twitch.ting.com. Start saving today and support Twitch. I like them. I'm running a phone on Ting. I'm running a mobile hotspot on Ting. And I don't have giant fees. It's really cool. I like it a lot. I am a customer. Just saying. Twitch.ting.com. Speaking of saving money, I want to buy this so bad, and unfortunately, my GPU and a audiophile sound card purchase have soaked up all of my cash for toys for the next 6 months. The Crucial M500 960 gigabyte SATA 2.5-inch 7mm with 9.5mm adapter spacer internal solid state drive, the lovely CT960 M500 SSD one, selling for freaking $449 right now on Amazon. $449.
It dropped $5 while we were doing the first half of the show. Actually,
they're screwing with me, man.
That's 46 cents per gigabyte.
That's cheap.
It is. It is significantly cheap.
Yeah.
The 240 gig model is $129. The 480 gig model is $259. So those aren't quite at 50 cents, but the 960 gig model for $449 is pretty impressive. We were talking with Alan last night. He said that it's actually a really good controller in here. It's a Marvell controller, but it's a great controller. No problems with these drives. If you look at the reviews on Amazon, if you got 505 reviews and it's 4.5-star rating, that's a pretty good indication of the reliability of the product. If you are if you're a user that's, if you think $449 is within your wheelhouse, this is a way to get an SSD where that's your only drive.
Right.
Maybe you've got some external storage or, something like that for your movies and video collection, but you don't have to worry about swapping games in and out or anything like that. You've got almost a terabyte of SSD in your laptop or in your desktop or wherever, right? It's pretty impressive to see. It's pretty impressive.
I want one. I really cannot do that right now.
Yeah, that's about it's about $100 less, um, 70, $80 less than the Samsung 840 Evo 1 TB drive, which would be like the next choice up. The 1 TB there is 529. So you're talking about 52 cents a gig instead of 46 cents a gig. So still pretty good. But both those drives are like, those are the two drives that continue to like kill it in terms of SSD adoption and sales, especially in high capacities. So it's neat to see things working out for the consumer as we keep going.
There you have it. Interesting update on if you have been eyeballing Galaxy PC parts, primarily I want to say GPUs.
Yep.
Or pretty much exclusively GPUs, if memory serves. Galaxy US posted on the Facebooks, because apparently that's how you talk to customers these days, that they are not leaving the North American market. They are changing their structure, discontinue working with their current sales rep in North America, but have no intention of ceasing business operations in this region. Hard OCP was kind of carrying the torch on this story, and I assume, knowing Kyle and the crew, will continue to carry the torch on this story. Quote, their concern grew as they tried and failed to contact Galaxy in the end of 2013. Emails went unanswered, and advertising campaigns seem to have all but disappeared. Even with this reassurance that Galaxy is not planning to leave the North American market, a lot of what Hard OCP says rings true with the stock and delivery issues Galaxy seem to have over the past year. There is something going on behind the scenes. They also suggest you do not make this a self-fulfilling prophecy by abandoning your support. I should say, I'm quoting Jeremy on this one. It's always interesting when you watch somebody try to move in, especially a market like GPUs, where there's been so much consolidation, elimination, or just self-destruction in the last decade. Would you, one, not that there's a lot of stock on the shelves right now, but would you be concerned about purchasing a Galaxy card? Would you pause before picking up that box at your local computer supply shop?
Yeah, I would say until a more kind of formal reply and kind of guarantee from somebody is out there, right? So I've had a pretty good relationship with the kind of North American Galaxy people. So has Kyle over at Hard OCP, which I know that you know very well. And we both kind of over the last month or so have had this odd engagement with them where we weren't exactly sure what was going on. And usually when companies stop communicating, that's like the worst possible sign there is for that. Right. Now it's good that Galaxy's coming out and saying, on their kind of social outlets that, hey, we're going to support you. That's good news for people who already own cards. But if you don't already own one, I think you're probably best not getting into that potentially problematic situation, right? And it would appear, if you look at Newegg, there's not a lot of GeForce Galaxy cards. Actually, if you go to Newegg and look for GeForce Galaxy, there is a GT610. That's it. That's all that's left. That's the only thing that's actually for sale. They had a GT640, but it's out of stock. So talking about a $50 video card. So there's no GTX 780s. There's no GTX 770s. So that kind of tells the story in and of itself. So either there's a management change that's happening and it will all be fixed next week or something, or next month, in which case we have this conversation again. But as it is now, I think it would be best to avoid any of that type of stuff for now. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can remember the day I first saw a gigantic booth at a trade show. I want to say the Jacob Javits Center upstairs, one of the largest booths I'd ever seen at a PC show at that particular time. Purple, massive, and filled with hand-assembled prototypes for the launch of Sony's VAIO computers. And Sony has had enough. The unit apparently was in the red. Sony's sold its VAIO brand to Japanese industrial partners. So it ends about right around a 20-year run, little under a 20-year run for Sony. Quote, while never a top 5 player in the industry, Scott writes, they had a significant presence in stores and in the possession of people I bumped into on a day-to-day basis. The division currently employs 1,000 people at Sony. They expect 250 or 300 to be hired with the deal. JIP hopes to focus on smartphones and tablets because somebody's got to fight with Lenovo over the desktop, notebook, phone, tablet market. That should be that should be interesting to see how that goes. Especially, I should say, actually, Sony hopes to focus on smartphones and tablets. My confusion. Apparently, I'm having a reading comprehension error. I will say the Xperia phones from Sony looked absolutely fantastic at CES. I'm curious to kind of see how they hold up in the real world, but those are very, very nice phones. Mr. Strout, were you filled with sadness over Sony's divestiture of the Vaio brand, or is it like whatever?
Not really. I'd say I haven't used a Sony laptop in a long time, but I remember buying, I think it was like the first like high-end laptop that I actually purchased. It was a Sony Vaio. It's like the first time I bought a laptop and I went, this looks cool, right? It was a 13-inch old Vaio. I'm sure I still have it in a closet somewhere. And it treated me well for a long time, and they had a lot of really cool designs for a long time as well. They were like in terms of innovation on the small form factors, long battery life, they were there before most, I think, but they were also very expensive when you got into that type of stuff. I think they were also the ones Sony made like a flip up. Like almost, I forget what it was, powered by a VIA processor, and it was kind of like the first Windows tablet with like thumb control on it and keyboard, and it was really innovative at the time. But they definitely have kind of fallen off in the last 5 years or so in terms of producing those types of unique designs and reliable designs, and you never really heard much of them anymore. So not a surprise, but I don't know. I don't know if is Japan Industrial Partners going to sell in the U.S. still? Somehow I kind of doubt it.
Right.
Maybe they do, but I doubt it.
Questions, people, Twitch at twit.tv is the email address, or you can tweet at Ryan Shroud or at Patrick Norton. We love to hear from you. You guide us. You keep us motivated to do our best on the show. We got a FreeNAS follow-up from Kyle. He says, thanks for the amazing fast response to my question. The motherboard I referenced, an Asus A88X Plus FM2 Bolton D4 SATA 6GB USB 3.8 HDMI ATX AMD motherboard could be a good fit for the guy building the FreeNAS box you read after my question. It has 8 SATA 3 ports. That's awesome. Add in one of the lower cost APUs and the RAM, and it could come real close to his $200 price point. About $230 the way he spec'd it. With an A4 6300 Richland 3.7 gigahertz socket FM2, 8 gigabytes of crucial memory, and an Asus A88X Plus FM2 motherboard, as we mentioned. Thanks again for all your hard work, Kyle. Kyle, that is really awesome. I'm really excited. I am going to be working with a couple of the core FreeNAS developers. I want to follow up to our FreeNAS build that we did on Ditryan. Yeah, I'm actually really excited. A couple of guys work for IX Systems. And one of whom is one of the like a core FreeSB developer. So I'm really excited. I've got a whole Q&A session going on with one of the guys right now because I was people said not nice things to me because we didn't tell people that they should use error correcting ECC RAM and some other server grade hardware. So it's an interesting discussion. I'm learning a bunch, and then we're going to have a pretty detailed build with some of the people that know the intricacies of every single element inside of FreeNAS. So I will keep you guys posted when that's available, and I'm really excited. And I got to say, I actually think I have an AMD A4 APU on my desktop. This might be a build for me, Kyle. So thank you very, very much. Richard says, recently our repair shop updated the tech machines to Samsung 840 EVO 120 gigabyte SSDs. Our primary purpose of the machines are to install hard drives from a customer's computer and run a virus scan, which went from taking almost 2 hours to now taking about 15 minutes. I consider this a huge win for Samsung as far as increasing our productivity. While going through the Samsung Disk Magician software, I noticed that while running on the performance setting for OS optimization and in rapid mode, the built-in benchmark shows a sequential write speed of 810 megabytes per second. and a sequential read of 1,000 megabytes per second. My question is, if we continue to run these in rapid mode, does it cause the flash to degrade at a more rapid rate? Well, no. I'd probably need Alan to explain it. Actually, well, Ryan, are you still there? Sorry.
Yeah,
you got very quiet over there. I wasn't sure if that was the pause before the horrified intake of breath before you smacked me through Skype.
No, I like that. As I'm not an IT person, but somebody who works in IT can understand the benefit of what an SSD brings with that first kind of performance metric he gives, right? Where it's like,
from 2 hours
to run a virus scan to go from 2 hours to 15 minutes, which you're talking about an 8x improvement in time saved right there. That's pretty impressive stuff. So the Disk Magician software, when you run it in rapid mode, is actually using some of your memory, some of your system memory for caching. Right. And so that is why when you run a benchmark, you get sequential write speeds of 810 and read speeds of over a gigabyte per second, when your SATA connection obviously doesn't support that. Right. So the performance benefits you're seeing are real. They're just not, how do I say this? You're not going to see those all the time, right? So it's blocking off some portion of your system memory to use as a cache for the SSD. And we've played around with that stuff here. There was a newer feature that they added to the 840s, I think just as recently as a few months ago, maybe, I think. The 840 Pro that we got with our AMD Kaveri test bed came with it pre-installed. Now, I will, for our use cases on testing and evaluation, we tend to turn that off because we want reliable, repeatable performance metrics that are going to set a base level of performance, right? The problem with the caching method is, it's running the benchmark, but it's benchmarking sections that it has cached on purpose, right? Whereas depending on how you're accessing your data on your drive, sometimes it could be cached and sometimes it won't be cached. There's not a real danger. There's no real problem with leaving it enabled. When I talked with Alan about it a little while ago, it was mostly there's the potential of, if the power happens to go out right when it's in the middle of a write caching action before it writes it back to the disk, that you may have a potential data issue. But the chances of that are very, 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 very small, because that caching and write back to the SSD is very, very fast. So I don't think there's an issue with leaving it on. And if you feel like some of the applications that you use are actually loading a little bit faster, or data files that you load up frequently, like Outlook data files, something like that, are loading up a little bit faster, then there's no reason to turn it off, right? It's not doing anything magical. It's not changing how the flash degrades. If anything, it may actually be extending it a little bit because it's reading it from system memory instead of off the disk. But reads from disk don't affect flash life at all to begin with. So I don't think it's not going to affect the life of the unit at all. But it's okay to leave on if you see a performance advantage from it.
There you have it. Got an email from Dennis about the coin mining issue. He says, I'm with you worrying about the impact of coin mining on AMD. Granted, it could be considered part of the problem. I have 5 cards, a couple of 7970s, a couple of 7950s, and even my old 5770. Sorry, I'll never have the capital to be building racks and data centers full of GPUs, but I had to at least give it a shot. One thought I had, maybe AMD could put out a card that is more suited to coin mining and get them off the gaming cards. AMD has Fire Pro. Maybe there's room in there somewhere for a Light Pro. Just a ton of shaders and enough other hardware to mine or do some other OpenCL. A half step between a GPU and a full-blown ASIC. More bang for the mining, not nearly a single purpose as an ASIC. The other side of, well, the coin is that the market will be flooded with used, generally well-maintained, high-end Radeon cards once the difficulty defeats them. And a lot of people will have a lot of cross-firing going on. I took the opportunity to finally pair up my 2-year-old 7970 with a buddy, and I've been getting my game on again. I don't know about anyone else, but I have coin mining to thank for that. Twitch is the best show on Twitch. Wow, thank you, Dennis. Dennis, that's an interesting thought. I mean, at some point, I will be curious, whether or not people sort of quit, get frustrated, grinding their teeth against Bitcoins and realizing they simply don't have the compute power to make the needle move in any meaningful way. Pardon me. And if they'll quit, or if they'll move on to one of these sort of 37 alternate digital currency schemes that are out there. Because if you started Bitcoin mining early, it was relatively easy to generate Bitcoins. And the later you started, the more difficult it got. So at this point, the groups that are actually moving the needle on Bitcoin mining have ridiculous resources that they're able to attribute to it. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Will people who have put together these systems, will they move forward into mining other platforms? Will they sell their cards on eBay? Will they get really, really angry and throw them all in the nearest lake? I personally would love to see a whole bunch of high-end cards showing up for cheap on eBay. But it's interesting. I also like the interesting idea of doing dedicated Bitcoin mining hardware for somebody like AMD, but there is dedicated Bitcoin mining hardware out there, and it's an interesting, amazing, mysterious kind of world, just unbelievable world. If you've never seen it, check out butterflylabs.com is one of them. The Monarch Butterfly Labs 28 nanometer technology Bitcoin mining card, the fastest and most power efficient Bitcoin miner yet. It's a 350 watt card that costs $2,200 now on pre-order. And this is a company that basically has dedicated itself to creating, Bitcoin mining hardware. Those are the ASICs that Dennis was mentioning. It's pretty crazy when you start looking at this. Bitcoin's gotten pretty serious. I look at this, it's like everything from a $275 box to huge computing centers to dedicated cards. It's interesting. It's interesting to watch. No idea where it's going to end up. So
yeah, I agree that when it ends, when the inevitability, so Bitcoin itself is already past GPU mining, it's onto custom ASIC mining. When Litecoin gets to that same point, right, where its cryptographic sequences are beyond where a GPU is really a viable resource, and they move on to custom ASICs that are much more cost efficient, then those GPUs will start to come back into the market. And the idea of then coming back in at a discount as people try to offload them quickly, it will be good for consumers, like he says, that kind of want to upgrade or add a second card to their system. The question will be is, when does that happen? If that happens in 3 months, that's great news for everybody that's listening. If that happens in like 18 months, then we're a year and a half of AMD GPU shortages. We are talking about, still having shortages then, and then when they resell them, is it still going to be useful? So there's still a lot of questions involved in all that, but I think that's as annoying as the shortages and price gouging is today. I'm hoping that at some point in the not too distant future, that will be given back to the gaming community in the form of lower cost, resold, used, mined GPUs.
And I'm going to say it, ladies and gentlemen, we wait with bated breath. One more email. Dave has a new build that says, hey guys, having a problem making a decision. I'm an old guy that a couple of times a week likes to sit down and play some first-person shooters. I'm looking to replace my 7-year-old PC and build a new middle-of-the-road gaming rig for less than $1,000. I'm weighing the difference between MSI's Z87 G41 socket 1150 for $80 and an MSI Z87 G45 gaming board socket 1150 ATX for $160. Question is, will I see real improvement with the gaming board with the killer Ethernet and Sound Blaster Cinema over the standard Z87 board? Second question, I was considering overclocking the CPU. So I was looking at reviews of all-in-one water coolers for better cooling. I see a few reviews of the coolers being able to overclock an i5 4670K from 3.4 gigahertz to 4.6 gigahertz, but only leading to a few frames per second improvement in gaming. Is this correct? I know games are reliant on the GPU, but I thought overclocking would show a bigger improvement in frames per second. I would like a reliable, stable machine. Is it worth overclocking for a few frames per second? I love this question in part because we just did a DieTryin.com, youtube.com/DieTryin, building a gaming PC. I should probably say DIY try-in, no G, slowly. But we just built a gaming PC. And one of the fun things about it was watching Nick, who Michael and I built it for, pull together some recommendations, like he was looking at PC Per, looking at other places, and then went to a Reddit forum where they basically concentrate on getting the most bang for your buck out of games or gaming machine builds. And I'm going to say right now, buy the freaking $80 board. You know, you don't need the killer Ethernet. You don't need the Sound Blaster Cinema unless maybe you're using it as a gaming PC in your home theater with a full complement of surround sound speakers. You know, if you're like most of us, you're gaming with a set of headphones or with a set of desktop speakers. Don't spend the extra $80. And I got to say, skip the water cooling, go with an air cooler, because a lot of the air coolers that are inexpensive now are absolutely fantastic, deliver incredible results. And if you're really on a budget, I'd worry a lot less about overclocking. I love overclocking because it always feels like you're getting something for nothing. But the reality is that overclocking isn't giving you a huge amount of gaming performance. Apparently, I have a cold. Pardon me. Thank you. You know, even on, you know, CPU-bound games, you know, clock speed used to be the end-all and be-all of performance. Clock speed is... Man, Ryan, is it? I don't know if it's. I'm feeling right about saying decoupled from clock speed, but it's not as directly related as it used to be. You know, and when you factor in, you know, basically the GPU versus CPU, and different games rely on different things, it's just a lot less simple than it was, you know, 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, CPU overclocking is going to affect game performance in a much different way, game to game. You know, if you look at a game like Rome Total War, and if you're at a part where performance is lagging, then overclocking your processor could improve things a lot. Overclocking your GPU is where you'll get most of your kind of easy benefit and frame rate, that as opposed to the processor, right? So it doesn't surprise me that you would increase your 4670 from 3.4 to 4.6 gigahertz and only get a few frames per second difference, especially at, you know, 25 by 14 or 19 by 10. What you'll see a lot of reviews do in stories is they will look at like 1280 by 720 and overclock to check CPU performance that way. And that helps because it makes it a less GPU bound scenario, puts a little bit more emphasis on this, on the process, on the CPU itself, and thus the frequency scaling will get you performance scaling. The problem is nobody games like that. Nobody games, well, I don't want to say nobody, but most people aren't gaming at 720p with image quality settings very low, right? That's how we artificially test for performance of the processor, right? But what you should be more interested in is the real world performance you get, because that's what really matters. You don't care about theoretical differences of what these two processors are. You want to know what the actual differences that these two processors generate between each other in the gameplay. So that doesn't surprise me. If you were to overclock you know, my experience is that if you overclock a GPU by 10%, you're probably going to get pretty close to 10% performance scaling, right? If you can up that clock speed of the GPU 10% and the memory clock speed 10%, you'll probably get 10% improvement in games, right? So on the CPU side, that's definitely not the case. So I don't think overclocking the CPU is a much less popular thing than it used to be, because processors are, you know, quote, fast enough, and in the games, in the applications where people are using, you know, high performance computing, which is mostly gaming, the CPU is not the dominant thing, right? So, you know, look back to our discussion we had earlier in the show about Mantle, where if you have a quad-core Intel processor, the differences you see in Mantle are going to be fairly minimal. If you have a dual-core or quad-core, very low-end processor from Intel or AMD, maybe you see some advantages from that. But the same thing would happen with with overclocking. If you had an older like Core 2 quad processor and you overclock that, then you might start to see some actual performance benefits.
One last question before we go, ladies and gentlemen. Richard writes in, he's looking to buy a monitor. I know the feeling. Here's one for you. Looking to buy a new high-res monitor for some photo editing and general desktop use, not gaming. Should I get a Monoprice 27-inch special or one of the new Dell 28-inch 4K monitors? This is an interesting choice. I'm going to drop a link in here. I apologize for not putting it in earlier. So Dell announced at CES. I got eyeballs on it for a few minutes. Their new 28-inch Ultra HD monitor. So this is Dell's third. Yes, this is Dell's third Ultra HD monitor. They started with like I want to say a 32 that sells for $3,500. They followed it up with a 24. It's $1,149. Those are both part of their Ultra Sharp series. And then they did a 28, which sells for $700, which, as Mr. Shrout will tell you, is a pretty good deal for a 4K HD TV, or at least a 3840 by 2160 HD TV. It's a good looking monitor. I prefer ultra sharp monitors when I'm shopping from Dell, and I also prefer buying refurbished because that's the way I roll. I'm cheap, and they're a fantastic deal for the price. If you're not gaming, yes, it is an option. Your video will look good, your desktop will look good. The pixel density is outrageous. You're going to be upgrading your GPU most likely. If you are a gamer, I would not buy most of the current crop of 30 hertz flat panels because it's just going to be a frustrating experience. Ryan, are you still running the 4K desktop at the office?
Yeah. So I'm looking at this monitor. This is a 30 hertz monitor.
Yeah.
The 2815Q. And if you're right, if you're only gaming, that's possibly usable. I would argue that I have used, like, for example, we have the 39-inch Seiki display here that you can get for less than this price. It's a 4K.
Mm-hmm.
The panel is definitely not as high quality as what this Dell panel is, but the experience of using a 30 hertz screen is pretty jarring. Now, from what I've been told, people who have used them for extended periods of time, you do kind of eventually just get used to it, right? There's just a little bit of a delay. It feels like mouse lag on your desktop, but if you're used to it, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you sit a 60 hertz panel next to a 30 hertz panel, regardless of the resolution, and you move the mouse and move windows around and see how they interact, you'll clearly see a difference there. I love the 4K increase. I love the move to 4K, and I love what they're doing with that stuff. I don't know if I'll be able to really back the 30 hertz 4K panels anymore, right? Because the 60 hertz panels, they're more complicated. You get into like dual stream, multi-stream transport. You got to have a DisplayPort connection. It has to be configurable with your driver, which it should be at this point. But they're using like whitelists from AMD and NVIDIA, so it's not always perfect. But I don't know. I also saw this Dell monitor, and it looked really, really good. I don't know if I would be able to recommend somebody use a 30 hertz panel. The Monoprice 27 is a really good kind of in between, right? I mean, it's still a higher resolution than you have now, probably 2560 by 1440. It's 60 hertz. It's an IPS display. It's $394, so it's half the not quite half the price.
For $550, you can pick up, a 30-inch WQXGA from Monoprice. $478, $550. That would be a pretty badass desktop display. I gotta say, I'm with Ryan. We were using a big old Seiki that Robert Heron got. And definitely not gaming. Not the most fabulous experience for a desktop at 30 hertz. Mm-hmm. I agree. You'll get used to it. But if you're moving between that computer and other computers, I think you'll find it a little Kill you.
exactly. I mean, yeah, if you have a laptop and then you like kind of use both at the same time, as I kind of do, I'll have the laptop on the desktop with me. That's going to be a very obvious difference that you probably will not like.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a shame too, because like those Seiki 39-inch TVs that you can get for $599 now, I think maybe even a little bit less. Visually, they're really impressive. Like if you're watching a video playback, they look great. But you'll notice that most of the demos that people show on 4K TVs at 30 hertz are slow motion nature videos. If you try to watch something high speed like sports,
Right.
I would encourage you to do so before really purchasing it. I lied, actually. That Seiki 39-inch 4K TV is $399 on Amazon right now.
Wow. I think that's great.
Wow. $399. The 50-inch version is $899.
Yeah. It's not bad looking. It's not great
it's
glass.
really not.
I wouldn't, I got to say, you spend a lot of time using the keyboard and a monitor at a desktop. I think in a lot of ways they influence, as long as you've got even a remotely recent desktop processor, I think you're more dramatically going to be your use is just going to be just dramatically impacted by the quality of the monitor and having a decent mouse and keyboard. I'm going to say I would go with the monoprice monitor. I like the Dell monitor. Not really stoked about 30 hertz. So what? I'm going to say it. Ryan and I are going to say it. Richard, get the 27, get the 30-inch flat panel from monoprice. I would hold off on 4K till it is rocking the 60 hertz.
The
other thing is the
this
GPU
might be
situation.
something interesting for me to try. I have that 39-inch Seiki monitor sitting directly in front of me. In fact, your picture is on it, staring me in the face.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, me too. But maybe it might be interesting to see. I have two 30-inch monitors on my desk. If I replace them with one 39-inch 4K, how much do I hate it and for how long?
Ladies and gentlemen, we will answer that question next week on Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. PCPer.com is the place to find Mr. Ryan Shrout, and it is all the hardware glory. You can find me at Techzilla or Die Trying at techzilla.com. And we got to go, people. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.